Expectations differ, of course, from school to school and teacher to teacher, but that's part of the education too. Most teachers will specify whether they want students to have a binder for each subject or a couple of huge binders segregated into core classes and specials, such as music and art. But after much trial and error, my students have found that a smaller binder for each subject works really well. At the end of each marking period, these binders will get cleaned out and all essential papers will get filed in case they are needed for the final exam. Allison Gorman, a math teacher in New Hampshire, has an excellent method for filing necessary papers. She keeps a milk crate file box for each of her classes in the classroom itself, where students are free to file personal folders, including their important quizzes, lab sheets, or tests, until they are ready to study for the final exam. If the teacher is not willing to take up space for this system, make sure your child has a file box at home, and encourage her to clean it out from time to time in order to make space for new papers. Within each subject binder, use a couple of those tab separators to indicate notes, homework, handouts, tests and quizzes, and loose paper. Reinforced loose leaf paper is one of the best inventions on the planet. If you can afford to upgrade from regular loose leaf paper and reinforcement stickers, get a couple of packages of the reinforced stuff and your kids' teachers will love you for it. One of the biggest issues I see on Wednesday morning locker cleanout are the pages of important notes that can't be filed away because all the holes are ripped out. Kids resort to punching the opposite side of the paper or making a tape edge to punch. I can't stress this strategy strongly enough. Encourage middle schoolers to put reinforced binder paper at the top of their back-to-school list. The key to learning how to organize one's materials and one's life is to try one strategy and see if it works. If it does, great, stick with what works. But if it fails, if papers are lost, deadlines are missed, and opportunities are lost as a result of flawed strategies, it's vital that the pain of that failure is felt. That pain, whether it's experienced as frustration, disappointment, sadness, or anger, is what prompts change and growth. It's what prompts the formation of a new strategy, and it's what prompts learning. I hate seeing my students or my children upset, but on the other side of that upset is the promise of improvement, one more step toward the day they will be able to successfully manage their lives. Viewed in that light, failure is progress. For some kids, their education in executive function can take years. In general, girls tend to get a hold of their executive function earlier in adolescence than boys. I know adults who still struggle with these skills, and for them, calendar alarms and to-do lists are the tools that keep them from losing their jobs and their minds. That's what middle school failures provide: low-stakes testing and experimentation with the tools that will work best the next time around. Because the task of acquiring organizational skills is about as much fun as a day at the dentist, start by helping kids organize the gear and schedules for activities that mean the most to them. Parents and teachers can help adolescents develop skills to cope with deficits in these areas, but what's needed during the middle school years is patience and a willingness to allow kids to deal with their failures and the consequences of their mistakes. Whether those consequences are detention for forgetting homework, being benched at soccer for forgetting a mouth guard, or a demerit for tardiness while they learn how to organize themselves and get out of the house on time. Let them fail. Let them get upset when they make mistakes, and when they do, don't save them. Every consequence experienced will hasten your child's acquisition of these skills. Conversely, every time you rescue, you push your child's helplessness out another day. Remember how little time middle school kids have to make middle school mistakes before they are thrust into high school and its relatively higher stakes. Every time you feel tempted to drive that homework to school or make that lunch, just envision this beautiful scenario. Your child packs his own bag, both for soccer and class, remembers to make and bring his lunch to school, makes a mental note to hand in that form you signed last night, jots some detail of a long-term project down on the calendar, and loads himself and his gear into the car without being reminded or asked. Won't that be lovely? Your kids will get there, and oh, what a beautiful world it is when they do. Chapter 9. High School and Beyond, Toward Real Independence. As I answered parents' questions after a high school presentation on intrinsic motivation and autonomy, one parent lurked at the back of the group, waiting patiently for the others to ask their questions. When the last parent had left the room, she leaned in close and whispered, "My son is 17, and I do everything for him." She paused and held my eyes, touched my arm, and said once more for emphasis, "Everything." I nodded and waited. I never let him fail, never. And he's 17. Even if I stop now, am I too late? By the time she finished her question, she was squeezing my forearm tightly, and I was pretty sure she was about to start crying. But I could see that she was determined, so we sat down and formulated a plan that would make the most of the last year of her son's childhood. We used to celebrate the end of childhood at 18, the traditional age of majority, when children loosened the bonds of our apron strings and struck out into the world in search of independence and purpose. Over the past couple of generations, however, childhood has been lengthened by a protracted adolescence, and consequently, the bounds of childhood are stretched further than ever before. As a result, many young adults have no idea how to function in a world that expects them to speak and act on their own behalf, and that world is beginning to take notice. Adolescent psychologist Jennifer Hartstein reports that she's increasingly seeing the children of these parents in her practice as they struggle to find their way as emerging adults. When these kids are not allowed to fall and pick themselves up, they never learn how to tolerate disappointment, manage their relationships, take responsibility for themselves, or cope with the anxiety of not getting what they want. I frequently pose this question to parents who are afraid to let go. How do you expect your child to be an adult if you never let them learn how? Mothers and fathers are accompanying children to college, job interviews, and salary negotiations. As the Journal of Adolescence noted recently, attempts at parental control are linked to negative child outcomes in emerging adulthood. The authors conclude, "It would seem that emerging adults should be personally invested in their own growth and development by solving their own problems with roommates, making their own decisions about employment, and seeking their own help from professors. By not doing so, emerging adults may be robbing themselves of the experience and practice necessary to develop skills that are essential to success in marriage, careers, and social interactions." In other words, until we step back and allow teenagers to live their own lives, surviving their own failures and earning their own triumphs, they won't get a chance to experience their own sense of competence. Competence they will need in order to be successful in their jobs, families, and yes, even their marriages. When I asked parents with grown children about their experiences, many acknowledged just how hard it can be to let go. I had a terrible time letting my children fail, so much so that my son, who is now 35, wisely told me in his early teens that I had to let him fail. And to him, that meant that I had to stop cringing when he did, because then he felt like his failing, rather than being a sign that he was stretching his boundaries, was a sign that he had not lived up to my expectations. He grew up believing that he should be perfect, and perfect meant that he never skinned a knee and never broke a sweat. The process of separating from us began for our children the moment we set them down on the kitchen floor and they took their first steps away from us. Every milestone, first step, first word, first day of school, first date marks the stages of the journey toward an independent life. Our job is not to protect them from their failures along the way, but to help them cope with setbacks as they occur. Because when they move out of their childhood home and begin to forge their own path, they're going to need all the resources and tools we can give them. The road ahead is theirs, not ours. And as tempted as we may be to pave the way for them so that we can live vicariously through their successes, it's time to let them live their own lives, to unravel our own priorities and needs from theirs. One very honest mother admitted how hard this can be to do. I am a high achiever. I come from a generation of high achievers. We are the baby boomers. When my children achieve, I have reflected glory. I am confused about where they end and I begin. High school and college offer parents a last chance to unravel those ties that bind our kids to helplessness. But I'm not going to sugarcoat the challenges inherent in changing course so late in the game. If you have been a directive or controlling parent for this long, both you and your kid are used to the dynamic, and it's going to take some work to undo the years of dependent routines and expectations. Teenagers, like toddlers, need a clear understanding of expectations and limits, and it can be hard to move the line in the sand. When parents begin to ask more of their older kids and stop rescuing them from the consequences of their mistakes, there will be tantrums and raging and indignation. The good news is that once the initial negativity and shock subside, it's easy to hand responsibility and consequences back to older kids because they are capable of so much. It's hard to know what tasks 5 or 10-year-olds can handle, but teenagers can do just about everything you can do, and sometimes better if you give them the chance. Adolescence may be a challenging phase of life for parents from a hormonal and emotional perspective, but in terms of learning and cognitive development, it's a time of huge mental and physical gain, the perfect time to launch a full-on push toward adult competence. Teens are deep into what's known as the formal operational stage, when they develop their ability to think more logically, deduce outcomes based on past experience, and connect abstract concepts to their reality in a way they were not able to just a few years before. Even more important, their executive function skills are more developed, so they have a newfound ability to plan for the future and come up with systems and methods for achieving the outcomes they desire. What's really fun to watch during this stage of life is the transition from the trial and error methods younger kids use to get at a desired goal toward a more strategic way of thinking. Adolescents can hold multiple possibilities and ideas in their brain at once, and consider how those ideas might play out before launching willy-nilly into a plan. As David Bainbridge explains in his book Teenagers, A Natural History, children may be charming little people who can talk and think a little, but we do not become fully mentally human until we are teenagers. When I talk to parents about giving kids the room to fail in high school, they claim they want to but can't. It's just impossible these days, they argue. The stakes have gotten too high. It's so intense and every grade matters. And I can't let my son fail because he only gets one shot at high school and there's too much to lose. These parents argue that even one failure could spell the end of a scholarship opportunity, the loss of honor roll, the unerasable record of a detention, academic probation, or suspension. Yes, I nod, that's true, but the greater risk lies in sheltering and protecting kids from failures while they are still living at home, because failures that happen out there in the real world carry far higher stakes. One mother, whose children are now grown and settled into their adult lives, pointed out that sometimes parents need to step back and consider what kind of success we really want for our children. The irony is there are all kinds of ways to be successful, and they mostly boil down to being happy. If we rob our children of their opportunity to fail, we rob them of their opportunity to, ultimately, be happy despite the realities of the economic and political world they will live in, because they won't develop the self-confidence and resilience necessary to find creative solutions to challenges in their own lives with their own realities. At a recent conference of independent school guidance counselors, one of the counselors asked for help getting one of her advisees to understand the reasoning behind the failing grade he'd received for a plagiarized science term paper. The student was angry with the teacher and with his counselor, and viewed the failing grade as an unfair punishment that put his scholarship at risk. His parents were furious and had threatened to sue the school over the situation. "I just don't understand this mentality," she told the room. "Everyone is blaming me, his teacher, and the school, and no one seems to be talking about the fact that he chose to cheat. No one seems to care that this is a lesson the student needs to learn. This kid wants to be a scientist. Just imagine if he plagiarized a scientific paper in 10 years in the professional world. It would mean the end of his career. Isn't it better that he learn about the consequences of plagiarism in high school rather than later?" She was absolutely right. If we fail to teach our kids these lessons now, they will be more likely to make the same mistakes again. In adulthood, the consequences are much more dire than a failing grade or an afternoon of detention. High school is the last opportunity we have before our kids face the real world with its real consequences. Once kids are in high school, capable of adult cognition and reasoning, it's time to give them the trust, faith, and responsibility they deserve. According to one high school teacher and administrator, responsibility is best learned when parents step back at the high school level to let the student, by trial and error, advocate, motivate, activate for him or herself. There should be a relatively moderate to high level of autonomy for a student at the high school level to begin to find his or her way to live and experience choice and to safely experience the consequences of personal actions. The important thing is that mom and dad are nearby to support from the sidelines, but not to be lead counsel. When parents take the supporting role, but balance it with the ability, and it is a learned skill for parents, to step aside and watch and welcome and expect the student to choose his or her way, students seem to make the better choices relatively quickly, if not automatically. Students want to do well. They want to make the right choice, but they also want to have the ability to choose. Given this sage advice, it's time to step back, loosen the ties, and let kids surmount the obstacles they encounter during these final 4 years of childhood. Each year of high school offers its own challenges and opportunities, and it's important to encourage your child to take advantage of them all. 9th grade, Deer in the Headlights. The first year of high school is incredibly frightening for many students. Just a few months ago, they were the reigning kings and queens of their middle school. But come fall, they are promptly demoted to the very lowest rung of high school social life, freshmen. I always found it terribly difficult to teach 9th graders because the fear of standing out or making a mistake is a powerful force in their decision-making process. One newly minted freshman confessed to me, "9th grade was not so much scary as it was intense. I was nervous all the time, worried something might happen. I just wasn't sure what." Generalized anxiety over the perceived disasters that lurk around every corner of freshman daily life can create a heightened fear of failure early on in high school. However, as most high school teachers are aware of this anxiety, freshman year can be the perfect time to step up and grab high school by the proverbial horns. Help your child understand that her teachers, particularly the ones who have been around for a while, understand that freshmen spend the first year of high school in a state of perpetual anxiety and befuddlement and are likely to mess up here and there. They know that freshman year requires patience, flexibility, and understanding, and they are there to help students understand what is expected of them in high school and beyond. Teacher David B. Cohen agrees. We build in an expectation of mistakes, or maybe another way to put it is we don't assume much about students' knowledge or skills. It is definitely a time for them to find their way. Part of my goal is to help students learn how to work with teachers, not just learn the course content. Encourage your kids to capitalize on these sympathies and potential sources of support by talking to their teachers whenever possible. Tell them to ask for clarification. Admit when an assignment is confusing. Seek teachers out for extra help. Establish positive relationships. Teachers love it when students take initiative. One high school teacher cited these opportunities to help shape a student's education as his favorite part of the job. The reason I am in education myself is because I love figuring out how I'm going to make school work for this one kid right here in front of me. Teachers can become powerful and reassuring allies in the confusing world of high school, and these relationships can make for meaningful and emotionally powerful letters of recommendation when it's time to apply for college or scholarships. For many ninth graders, the first high school tests, quizzes, and papers will serve as a rude awakening after the relative ease of middle school, and it's really important for parents to respond with calm reassurance and support rather than panic. Frame ninth grade for your child as a getting-to-know-you period. Teachers and faculty are expecting first-year high school students to fail and want to help them figure out what went wrong, what went right, and how to make adjustments accordingly. If a low grade serves as a learning experience, the experience is not a failure. If, however, nothing is learned from that low grade, if it serves only as an opportunity for parents to freak out and tighten the screws, raising anxiety and a pervasive sense of failure, it becomes a lost opportunity. Confusion and anxiety will give way to comfort and routine as the year wears on, but the sooner students learn to take advantage of the ready-made support system around them in the form of teachers, guidance counselors, and older students, the better. These mentors are well-versed in the many ways freshman failures can be repurposed into shiny, bright successes. So encourage your kids to use these people and this valuable year to their advantage. 10th grade, my favorite year. When I first started teaching high school, I was assigned to sophomores, and I could not have been happier. The fear and anxiety of freshman year has faded, and the much-hyped mania of junior year has not yet begun. 10th grade is a time to settle in and enjoy high school before the pace picks up and the love of learning is sacrificed at the altar of SATs and college admissions. Sophomore year introduces the option of electives, the first opportunity students are given to exercise choice over what and when they learn. Remember that the first step toward intrinsic motivation is autonomy, and this is the first time they will have had any autonomy over academic content. Do not tread on this newfound independence. Let kids choose their courses. If they don't feel ready for an honors level course, listen to them. If they want to take on a harder course because it's a subject they love, listen to that too. A mother told me about a shock she received at her daughter's 10th grade back-to-school night. The parents were assembled in an honors-level English class, and before the teacher had even introduced himself, he said, "This is a really challenging class, and if your kids are in this class because they want to be here, it's going to be a great year. They will work really hard and learn a lot. However, if your kids are here because you want them to be here, this is going to be one very difficult year for your kids." This teacher elaborated later on that the students who have chosen to take a difficult class will be able to handle the constructive criticism and failures that come with that challenge, while the kids who have been forced to enroll won't feel the same investment in the class or its material. After 30 years teaching this very challenging advanced placement class, he'd seen the difference personal investment can make, both in grades, AP test scores, and the quality of his students' lives. Just as kids enjoy books they have selected for themselves more than a book that's been assigned to them, they are far more likely to engage in a course they have selected for themselves. Let them choose their language, their musical instrument, their sport. If they want to switch things up and try something new, great. Yes, Let kids quit an activity or sport if they dislike it, because quitting will free them and you up to find their next big thing, something that may just shape their personalities and their passions. The fact that they have taken French since 4th grade and have invested 5 years in it is not a good reason to veto their desire for change. Accordingly, 10 years spent playing the piano will only fuel their success if they choose to switch to the guitar or the trumpet or even the ukulele. Knowledge in one discipline only fuels facility with another, so let them expand on their prior knowledge in French or piano by applying that learning somewhere else if that's their choice. The key word here is choice, and it should be theirs if you want them to find ownership and pride in their learning and growth. 11th grade, crunch time. Junior year is often ruined for students thanks to the commonly held and oft-repeated perception that time is running out on transcript padding and college prep. Juniors were always my most anxiety-ridden and panicked students because the pressure is on from the first day of 11th grade. Teachers and guidance counselors like to remind students that the grades that count are junior year grades, and if they have any chance of getting into the college of their choice, this is the most important year of their entire lives. Hogwash. All the years leading up to junior year are important, and yes, 11th grade is important, but not because it's the last chance to add debate club to their resume. I love Barnard College President Deborah L. Sparr's perspective on parents' efforts to cram every AP and community service group and extracurricular activity into their high school students' transcripts. As a college president, though, someone who oversees the review of roughly 6,000 carefully crafted applications every year, let me promise you, we don't care. Show me that your kid is great at math or that she truly loves to play the cello. Tell me he edits the high school literary magazine and has an extensive stash of 19th century Russian novels. But the expensive trips to far-flung poverty, 52 activities scattered across the 7 days of the week, honestly, it doesn't help. Give me a kid with a passion for learning, a kid who has demonstrated some measure of autonomy and motivation. Give me a kid who knows his or her mind. But these things are harder to come by if the child has been tutored and handheld from birth. The lesson of this college president? An emphatic no on the hand-holding and an enthusiastic yes on every opportunity to cultivate autonomy and motivation. Fortunately, junior year offers ample opportunities for both. Yes, college-bound students will have to take the required tests this year. And yes, junior year courses are tough, particularly for students who have opted, or whose parents have opted, to push the limits of the space-time continuum and take 10 courses in the 9 hours of a regular school day. However, junior year is also time for more academic autonomy and the ability to dip into electives in the arts, sciences, and literature that may ignite a passion or stir a soul. Some schools offer students opportunity for independent studies, more free periods, and the freedom to venture off campus on their own recognizance. Junior year also marks the first time many kids can legally hold jobs, and I've met many students who have found autonomy and motivation through employment. One volunteers at her local art museum, helping out wherever she's needed among the paintings and sculptures she loves. Another interns at an aquarium as a touch tank instructor, teaching younger kids about starfish and urchins while indulging her passion for marine biology. Another apprentices with a carpenter after school and is learning the art of constructing post and beam structures. These students are not learning how to pad their college applications and earn pocket money. They have found ways to turn learning into purpose and identity. One student who works in a lab after school describes the joy she has found there. It is like a meditation room to me. Once I get into the groove of my experiments, nothing else matters. A quiet rhythm forms and all stress and worry flows away. In the lab, I feel important. I have a mission. For the first time in my life, I felt as if I could take what I was learning and use it and be good at it. Experiences such as these offer the perfect place to risk failure. Armed with a strengthened identity and sense of purpose, kids can handle the short-term disappointment that accompanies personal failure and emerge stronger for it. Encourage your child to reach for things he might not usually try for: an internship, publication in a magazine or newspaper, a part in a play. Push your kid to take risks in that reach, because while he might get rejected 99 times out of 100, that one acceptance or opportunity or path could be the one that leads to a lifelong passion. Junior year goes by incredibly fast, and as college and the workforce loom even closer, it becomes more important than ever that you encourage your child to test his own boundaries and comfort zone at every opportunity while you remain nearby and supportive of his efforts. 12th grade, the final frontier. From the first day of senior year, everyone knows it's coming. Whether you and your teen anticipate graduation day with fear, excitement, or the usual trepidation, it is only 180 school days away. It's on students and teachers' minds every day. I even know students who keep calendars in their locker to mark the daily countdown to the big day. 12th grade offers heretofore unknown heights of independence, and every time I've taught seniors, they've reminded me of their need for it at every opportunity. They push their teachers away while simultaneously clinging to us for support, and this dance does not end until that 180th day. Some get right down to business and sever their relationships in the months leading up to graduation in order to end the dance, and others hold on tight until the moment it's time to walk away in their caps and gowns. I hear about this same dance going on at home when parents call to lament that their child alternately disengages from the family and relies on them for support and love. One important place to start handing over some control is during the search for college. Your child's choice of college is the first and arguably the most important decision she will make in her young adult life. Resist the temptation to talk up schools you wish you had attended or the school everyone in your family has attended for the past 3 generations. College choice is a matter of personal fit, and by personal, I'm talking about your kid, not you. Open your mind, encourage your child to open his mind, and look at schools beyond the annual top 50 list posted on websites and in magazines. Hand your child some power over his choice of school, and he will be far more likely to invest his time, energy, and intellect. I asked a high school vice principal to tell me about the differences he sees between students who have been encouraged to grab hold of their autonomy and those who have been denied the opportunity. He said, "The autonomous student leaves high school better prepared for the world. He or she leaves a stronger individual with strengthened social and coping skills. A more autonomous student leaves high school with a keen understanding of what works for her as a student and also as a community member in the world at large. She has a strategy to navigate the world. On the other hand, the student who leaves high school as a dependent follower is much less ready for the world at large and much less prepared." As senior year draws to a close, students are faced with a wonderful opportunity to find joy in the process of learning. As students realize how little time they have left in school and the heavy lifting of high school is almost over, they can relax and let go of some of their fears. Now that the results are in, let your kid have these last moments to enjoy the fruits of his labor before he moves on to the next phase of his journey. After the pomp and circumstance. High school graduation and the life that comes after, whether that includes college or a job, marks a hard line in the sand. However, as childhood increasingly bleeds over into adulthood, many parents are unsure of how to stay on the appropriate side of it. The easy answer is that there are very few spheres of college life that belong to you. Your child is a legal adult, and even if you are footing the college bills, it's time to stop intervening and let her suffer the consequences of her decisions and failures. Feel free to call the financial aid office or the bursar if a bill is due, but that's it. Everything else, course selection, talking to professors about grades, negotiating roommate disagreements, and handling housing snafus, this is all stuff your kid should handle. If she has not dealt with any of this before, now is the time to let her start. When I asked University of California, Santa Cruz professor Michael Chemers to elaborate on his experience with students who have been overprotected against failure and are consequently unprepared for the demands of life on their own, he replied, "I know we've all heard horror stories about kids who show up to college without any clue how to do their laundry. I had a student in my office in tears because of this. But that's not really the problem. It doesn't take long to learn how to do your laundry. The real problem comes from the mindset of a student who emails a professor with a demand at midnight and is furious when it hasn't been addressed by 8:30 a.m. when a class starts. It's when a student insists that having a real desire to do the work should earn the same grade as doing the work. It's when a college professor gets a phone call from an angry parent demanding to know why a student is failing. There's a terrible wake-up call coming, and it's not for the professor, because if your child can't write a 10-page research-based argumentative paper by his or her first year in college, it's too late. Elementary and secondary school teachers are professional teachers. Professors are professional scholars who share what they know with students as part of their agreement with the university. The rest of their commitment is to their own research and service to the university and their profession. It is not possible for a professor who is teaching a class of 300 to stay for an hour every week with each student who needs remedial help, nor is it reasonable to expect a professor to engage with a parent over every student's particular needs or problems. In fact, the law expressly forbids us to do so without express consent from the child. On the many occasions when I have been called by an angry parent, I simply say, "Your child is my client. You are not. You need to speak to your child." In order to address the voluminous requests of parents who are concerned for their children, many colleges and universities have added parent resource pages to their Dean of Students site, and many others offer on-campus family orientation for parents. But just because these sorts of programs are offered does not mean you have to take advantage of them. Consider which message you want to send to your child as she heads off into the world. "I did not do the job I was supposed to do when you were in my home, so now I will follow you into your adulthood to make sure you don't mess up." Or, "You are now an adult, and I trust you to be able to hack it in college." Colleges and universities are actively seeking parents out and asking them to convey this message explicitly and clearly to students before they arrive on campus. The webpage for parents at Northwestern University offers this reminder about what children really need from their parents during the college years. They need you to let go. They need to be able to make mistakes. They need to know that you believe in them. They need to know that you are interested, not intrusive. I hope you started fostering your child's autonomy and competence well before your son or daughter left for college, but in case you are off to a late start, here are some autonomy-supportive conversations you can have in the months leading up to the fall of freshman year. Discussions that can help students feel in control of their college experience. Set goals for the first year. Ask your child what he imagines the first year of college might look like, and then ask him what he could do to turn that perfect fantasy year into reality. Next, narrow those goals down. What specific things might he be able to do in his first month on campus in order to set the stage for a good first year? Keep in mind that these discussions should be supportive and in the spirit of guidance rather than dictatorial and controlling. Identify allies on campus. If she is not sure about how to reach her goals, recommend that she talk to someone who can offer guidance. Help her identify advisors, professors in areas of interest, and deans who are equipped to help. Make sure she understands the benefits of getting to know her professors. Try to come up with a few key on-campus people she can go to for advice and help, so she does not have to call you in a panic in November just before final grades come out. If she's religious, find out who's who at the Newman Center or the Hillel House or whatever other organization might fit her spiritual needs. Look up the email of her professors, her advisor, or her department head and find their offices on the campus map. Draw a little red circle around student health services and mental health services. Amid the chaos of the first few months of college, your child will benefit from having some idea of the key people who are in her corner if she needs them. Check in. Revisit this conversation over the holidays. Is his first year measuring up to his expectations? Why or why not? What might he have done differently? You could even include younger siblings in this conversation because it could save them many headaches when it's their turn to head off to college. Locate your mute button. Keep your thoughts to yourself about how you think his college career should be going. This process is about teaching him how to solve his own problems and how to form a plan and follow it through. If that first year does look like his perfect ideal of college freshman year, imagine how proud he will be that he made that happen. If you take over, you will turn college into your victory, not his, and once again, this will undermine his sense of autonomy and competence, putting off his eventual emergence into adulthood. He's in a race against time, and in less than 4 years, he's going to have to go out into the big, bad world and fend for himself. He can't afford to have any of these formative experiences taken away from him. Roommate issues don't involve you. As we've seen, learning how to deal with people whose ideas, background, and habits are different from your own is a great learning opportunity. Once your child has chosen or been assigned that roommate, do not call, text, friend on Facebook, or Google that roommate. You won't be living with him. Your kid will. Professors don't want parental input. Do not get involved in disputes over grades, seating, scheduling, or incompletes. Ever. Not if your child is shy, not if your child is failing, and certainly not if your child is too busy to deal with it because she is on spring break. Not only will you be depriving your child of a valuable opportunity to learn how to stand up for herself and reason with other adults in a mature and competent manner, professors will lose all respect for you and your child if you interfere. Kids will ask for help when they need it. Trust that your children will call or text when they need you, but it might not be as often as you'd like. Keep in mind that they will call more often if you are not the type of parent to jump straight into an inquiry of grades, assignments, and whether or not your child made that appointment with the economics professor that you asked him to make last week. These 4 years will provide the friendships, connections, lessons, and experiences that will shape his adult life. Support your child, but know when to step back and allow him to embark on his own life. One of Hartstein's clients, a 32-year-old woman whose parents have managed every aspect of her life and now finds herself, in Hartstein's words, unable to live life on life's terms, offers this warning to parents like hers. You know, too much support isn't a good thing. It doesn't teach you anything, like how to survive in the world. It can be a really huge disservice. Give your child the opportunity to succeed. Send him to college with a first aid kit and some emergency cash and a confidence in all the things he will learn. Let him have the freedom to create the person he wants to be and understand the paths and influences he does not want to follow. If he fails, and he will, that will be evidence of a dead-end experience, and he will learn not to go down that road again. If, however, you pave the way out of that dead end, he learns nothing new. You have lived your life and learned the lessons it has granted you. Now, it's his turn. Part 3. Succeeding at School. Learning from failure is a team effort. Chapter 10. Parent-Teacher Partnerships. How our fear of failure undermines education. In my teaching life, I correspond with parents all day long, communicating news about late assignments, congratulations for hard-won victories, and updates on behavioral problems. Each time I email or call home, I struggle with the contents of those emails or phone calls, particularly when they contain bad news or criticism, and I strive to keep my words gentle and measured, yet firm. I pray I've struck the right tone and that my communication triggers the start of a great partnership, a concerted effort between parents and educator, working together to accomplish what no one person can do alone. Some go well and some don't. The example I hold up as the epitome of a great home and school partnership occurred one afternoon when a student posted something inappropriate about another student online during school hours. Teachers and administrators researched the incident, figured out who was responsible, and contacted parents within hours to let them know we would be instigating appropriate school disciplinary steps in response to their children's actions. The parents thanked us for addressing the issue fairly and quickly, for identifying the guilty parties in the situation, and assured us that they would be following up with further discussion at home. Everything went according to plan. We felt supported by the parents felt supported by the school, and the students understood that home and school were a united front. This outcome is a best-case scenario, and when it happens, it's a beautiful thing. Everyone benefits from the unified effort, and the students are held accountable and allowed to learn from their mistakes. However, homeschool communications also have the potential to go poorly, and the resulting conflict can be disastrous to homeschool partnerships and to the education of the student we are all working to support. Here's my own sad and humiliating account of just how far teachers and parents can fall when parent-teacher relations degrade. It's 8:11 and I'm late for my first class. I have to teach 7th grade Latin, but I'm trapped in my boss's office, an irate parent blocking my exit. I briefly consider climbing out the window, but the ground slopes away from the building and the fall could kill me. I'm willing to risk it, I realize, as I peek out the crack between the office door and its frame. The mom doesn't know I'm in here. I could wait her out. But maybe if I get some momentum and keep my eyes down, I might be able to sneak by her and escape unscathed. I check the clock, 8:12. Damn. I take a deep breath, remind myself that the students are waiting for me to teach them how to amo amas amat, and step out from behind the door. Between my self-imposed prison and freedom lies this angry mother lion, tensed and eager to eviscerate anyone who comes between her cub and a top-tier high school. Unfortunately, I'm her preferred prey today because I'm the teacher who emailed her 30 minutes ago with news of her son's low grade in English class. What has brought parents and teachers to this place? How could I, an otherwise confident person, a professional with more than a decade of teaching under my belt, feel compelled to hide from a woman who should be my ally in the quest to educate her child? On the other hand, I can't imagine this mother is having an enjoyable school year either. All the worry and anxiety over every tiny detail of her son's school day. All the frustration and anger directed at his teachers for their perceived failings and shortcomings. It must be exhausting. She certainly never looks happy. In fact, many of my students' parents look positively overwrought and precariously close to their breaking points. But enough about us. We are merely collateral damage. The real victims in this situation are the students. Many of my students express tension and outright fear for weeks before report cards come out, and in the days before parent-teacher conferences, they look as if they are bound for the gallows. Even when they adore their parents and respect their teachers, loyalty to one gets in the way of the relationship with the other, sort of like negotiating divorcing parents. My students cannot possibly trust me completely when I am locked in battle with their parents. Despite tensions between parents and teachers, decades of research shows that positive family-school relationships are vital to student success. Positive parent-teacher partnerships don't just benefit students, they are a boon to everyone involved. Teachers who encourage parental involvement in school are rated more favorably than teachers who do not, even in unrelated areas such as educational effectiveness. Students learn more when families are involved in their education, and parents feel more engaged and invested in their child's education when teachers invite them into the process. If this is the case, why do so many teachers cite the challenge of dealing with their students' parents as their main reason for abandoning the classroom? Educators and education researchers advocate for home-school partnerships and praise the value of family involvement in education. Yet in discussions with other teachers, they readily admit skepticism about the potential success of that involvement. I'm not the only educator shaking in my boots, even if I am the only one who has been reduced to hiding in a dark office. However, based on hundreds of conversations with teachers and administrators on this subject, maybe I'm not. A teacher of more than 40 years explains the shift in the parent-teacher relationship this way. When I started teaching, the parent, schools, and law enforcement officials were all on the same side. Authority was aligned and united. It was not to be questioned. Then came the 60s and its aftermath. For the children of the 60s, especially those who spent their teens in that era, the relationship between citizen and authority became much less secure. Authority was indeed to be questioned. Differences were to be celebrated and accepted. Eventually, the children of the 60s became parents. Those who questioned authority now became the questioning authority. Even before authority was called into question by the counterculture of the 60s, relationships between school and home had become complex. The history of education in America reveals the precarious balance of power between home and school, state and federal, public and private. During the colonial era, students were taught in a combination of home, church, and schools. Education was a collaborative effort, and no one organization or person took ownership over it. When everyone was in the effort together, it was much easier to cooperate and work toward common goals. Around 1840, the federal government began to make rules and regulations concerning the American educational system that created an ideological divide between home, church, and school. Early in the evolution of our educational system, open discussion between teachers and parents was the norm, and students graduated from one skill to the next rather than from one grade to the next. However, as we moved to a standardized system of differentiation by age and report cards replaced interpersonal communication, the divide between home and school widened. Teachers were no longer simply well-read members of the community. They were formally educated, trained and certified professionals brought in from outside and charged with the education and intellectual growth of an entire community. Schools and parents began to clash over teachings about language, religion, ethnic traditions, and ethics. Parents perceived that schools were trying to usurp the authority of the family, and some of those families took schools to court in order to have the legal right to raise their children according to their community's traditions and values. When Jonas Yoder took the state of Wisconsin all the way to the Supreme Court in 1972 over the right of the Amish to take their children out of school after 8th grade, the United States upheld their right to do so, and with that precedent on the books, the disparate priorities of home and school came into conflict more and more often. At the same time, respect for teachers and the teaching profession continued to fall. And in 1983, Gallup found that fewer than half of all those it polled in 1983 wanted a child of theirs to become a teacher, down from 3/4 of those it asked 14 years before. Teaching used to be a noble profession, one that garnered respect and fostered pride. As teachers flee the profession in record numbers, they cite frustration with legislators, administrators, lobbyists, and anyone else who seeks to push agendas on the day-in, day-out work of educating our nation's children. The rocky transition to the Common Core state standards has only served to highlight the deep rifts between parents, schools, and policymakers. And as the media whips everyone's dissatisfaction up to a fever pitch, it's become difficult for students to hear or learn much above the shouting. Teachers are angry that they were not consulted during the creation of the standards. School administrators feel handcuffed by the ham-handed manner in which the standards were rolled out. And parents are frustrated by the fact that their children's education is suffering during the transition to these new standards. It had become commonplace for parents to challenge teachers' procedures and practices before the implementation of the Common Core, but the problems exposed by its rollout have given parents cause to question just about every aspect of their children's education. What is lost, first and foremost, in all this conflict is the trust we must have in each other to help children through their mistakes and emerge with an education. Kids need the space to fail, and teachers need the time and benefit of the doubt to let that failure play out in the form of learning. One longtime teacher and administrator from a large public high school outlines the opportunities that are lost to teachers when they are barred from the fertile educational territory opened up when their students fail. When parents step in to defend a child's poor choice or mistake or failure in order to avoid the consequence of that action or performance, they tend to lose sight of the fact that if the student does not have the experience of making mistakes and living and learning with the consequence of that mistake or failure, college may be a very difficult experience thousands of miles away from the security of mom and dad when he eventually has to deal with an experience on his own. Mistakes are opportunities to grow. Failures or unsuccessful attempts are the same, and students need to live through those experiences to develop a toolbox of coping mechanisms to lift them and move them forward. That toolbox, the accumulated store of skills students earn through their failures, adaptations, and growth, is more important than any mathematical formula or grammatical rule. And this is why teachers are frustrated when they are not allowed to help students stock up and hone those skills. A mother of 3 explained her autonomy supportive strategy this way. If you knew there was something that could help your child, that could give them tools to help them later in life, could help them face the future with more strength, maturity to face life's challenges, wouldn't you do it? So if you are ready to forge a true partnership with your child's teacher and to give your child the tools that will help him later in life, here are some guidelines that will help you create positive partnerships with teachers and administrators from the very first day of school. Show up at school with an attitude of optimism and trust. Your child is listening and watching, particularly on the first day of school. If you are trusting and relaxed, he will be trusting and relaxed. If you are nervous and watching for the teacher to screw up, he will be nervous and watch for his teacher to screw up. My best student-teacher relationships have always been with the kids whose parents assume that I will take good care of their child and give him the education he deserves, and the worst were with students whose parents distrusted me from the start. You don't have to love your child's teacher or disregard negative rumors, but if you give teachers the benefit of the doubt, they will be much more likely to give your child the same. Be on time. I watched Judd Apatow's film This Is 40 recently and was tickled by a scene in which the mother character drops her kid off at school and the homeroom teacher greets her at the door with the following exchange. Teacher: Hi, listen, Charlotte really needs to get here on time because she really just needs the extra time to settle in. Mom, mystified: We are on time. Teacher, deadpan: Being on time means being early. Judd Apatow is absolutely right. Being on time means being early because kids require at least 15 minutes to wrap their sleepy brains around the fact that they have arrived at school. Kindergartners need to check in with friends and stow their lunchboxes, and older kids need to unload their backpacks, hand in work, gather their materials for the day, and mentally prepare for their first class. I've watched middle school students stand in front of their lockers, hair all askew from heavy sleep, for a full 5 minutes, just staring at their books before they are able to muster the wakefulness required to select their materials. Adolescents are particularly challenged first thing in the morning due to the fact that teens' sleep cycles are plagued by a phase delay, or delayed melatonin release. Simply put, adolescents get sleepy about 2 hours later than adults, and consequently have a tendency to wake up later. Consider how well you would function if you woke up sleep-deprived, then parked your car and ran straight into a presentation to the head of the company with no coffee, no time to take off your coat, no moment to take a deep breath and prepare for the day. Kids who rush into school at the last minute remain frazzled for much of the morning. Students who arrive on time and have an opportunity to take stock of the day are more prepared for class in terms of their materials and their emotional state. If tardy becomes a habit, do not blame it on the child. You are the parent. Make being on time a priority. Back your morning schedule up by a half an hour if you have to. I've been in charge of marking down tardies for the past 5 years at my school, and I can attest to the fact that kids who are tardy are inevitably stressed out, particularly if the tardiness is not their fault. Children have a heightened sense of justice, and they understand that being late is unfair and disrespectful to their teachers and to the other kids who are distracted when they arrive late to class or homeroom. So don't heighten their anxiety by allowing blame for being tardy to fall on their shoulders. Read the school's attendance policy and follow it. Nothing is more frustrating to a teacher than a student who announces he is leaving for a week tomorrow and would like to know what he will have to do to keep up with the class. Kids suffer when parents don't plan ahead for school absences, both because they don't have time to get work done ahead of time and because teachers get frustrated and short when their best-laid classroom plans are foiled by unexpected student absences. Don't schedule vacations that will interfere with the first or last week of school. Try not to lengthen trips by taking a day off early or coming home a day late. Understand that the last days of a term or the classes just after vacation are crucial because teachers are often scheduled out to the minute when time is short and a unit needs to be completed. As teachers are expected to get through even more material just as testing steals away their class time, it has become even more important for students to be present and accounted for in class. Emergencies arise, of course, and when they do, teachers try to be as understanding as possible, so try to give them the same consideration. Be friendly and polite. We tend to abandon good old-fashioned friendliness and congeniality when our lives become hectic and overwhelmed. Not only does friendliness make the day flow more easily, it really does make a difference in the way teachers perceive parents and their children. I'd love to say that teachers can mentally separate even the most wonderful children from their surly parents, but it's not always possible. Alice could be my favorite student, the most incredible, charismatic, kind, and generous student I have ever taught. But if Alice's mother is abusive or unreasonable, our relationship is tainted. As much as I want to keep Alice separate from her mother, that memory of her mother coming into school and waggling her finger in my face in front of an entire class of students is always there, coloring the way I think about our relationship and my communications with the child. Even if I could banish Alice's mom from my brain and keep the two completely separate, I certainly don't want to voluntarily make contact with someone who humiliated me in front of my students. Furthermore, when it comes time to bring up concerns or praise about Alice, I'm going to be reluctant to pick up the phone or send an email if her mother has been rude to me. That's just basic human nature. When the mouse learns it's going to be shocked when it reaches for the tasty treat, you'd better believe that mouse will stop reaching for the tasty treat, even if it's hungry. Freud noted that it's in our basic human nature to attain pleasure and avoid pain. And humiliation, distrust, passive-aggressive interpersonal communication, and disrespect are excruciatingly painful for teachers. Consequently, if you humiliate, distrust, or offer up passive-aggressive communications with your child's teacher, be prepared for radio silence to follow. We will continue to educate your child and hold him to the same standards, but we sure as heck will avoid talking to you about it unless we have to. Project an attitude of respect for education. If your attitude toward teachers is one of respect for the educational process, your child will be a lot more likely to respect, enjoy, and engage in her education, and we will look forward to telling you all about it. There's nothing I love more than intercepting a parent at drop-off or pickup just to tell her about a fantastic contribution her son made in class that day. Or that, as I read her son's last paper, it occurred to me just how far his writing has come over the past year. Teachers cherish good relationships with parents and take great pleasure in offering up those communications. Teachers are also a lot less likely to be upset by constructive criticism or negative feedback from a parent they have come to like or admire. Some of the most effective feedback I have received about flaws in my teaching has come from parents. However, if that same feedback had come from a parent I don't respect, or a parent who cries wolf every time her son comes home with a complaint, I would be a lot less likely to take that feedback as useful or valid. Model enthusiasm for learning. Your attitudes toward education will be your child's attitude. Likewise, your enthusiasm for the process of learning for learning's sake is vital to instilling the same in your child. Let your child see you reading for fun. Pick up a book about a topic you know nothing about and become the resident expert on something, maybe Greek gods, Renaissance art, or botany. Learn to play an instrument. Go to the library and browse books in subjects you've never read. Or check out college courses from the great courses and take a class you never got to take in high school or college. Find out what your child is reading at school and get an audio version of that book for the car. Talk about the book, about the big ideas, and what the characters are up to. You will get the opportunity to understand what your child is reading and learning, which will open the door to conversations about what it would take to make Boo Radley come out, or why Holden Caulfield wears that ridiculous hunting hat. Make sure your first communication with a teacher is positive. One of my favorite bits of teacher advice applies to parents and is a great way to ensure a positive relationship from your very first moments with your child's teacher. In his book, The Essential 55, educator Ron Clark advises teachers to make sure the first interaction they have with parents is positive. This is a great guideline for parents as well. Make contact in the first month or so of school and find something nice to say. Mention an interesting dinnertime conversation you had with your child about a book he's reading in class. We had a great conversation last week about that Frost poem you taught Kevin, for example. As long as the feedback is genuine, it will create the beginnings of a productive bond. This sort of communication places parents firmly on the same team as teachers and sets the stage for trust, even when students flounder or fail. Parents who sit at the back of the room at back-to-school night, fold their arms, and convey dissatisfaction, however, are not likely to get picked for the team. Willing, eager, and polite participants are the choice picks for this parent-teacher team, and teachers will fall all over themselves to make sure they end up playing with the positive, friendly parents. Invite teacher feedback. Teacher feedback is valuable, so encourage it from day one. Let teachers know that you view both positive and negative observations as a vital part of your child's education and the parent-teacher partnership. On a practical level, let the teacher know how to reach you. If you prefer email, let her know. If you work long hours or the night shift or would prefer that she call you at work, let her know that too. Conversely, know how the teacher would like to receive communications and adhere to that preference. When you do reach out, understand that most teachers either cannot or will not be checking email throughout the day. They are supposed to be teaching your children, after all. Ask the teacher whether she'd prefer email or phone and comply. Make sure the teacher knows you are not just paying lip service to the idea of feedback. Let her know that you are ready and willing to listen. Wait a day before emailing a teacher over a perceived emergency or crisis. While you should absolutely let teachers know about emergencies at home as soon as possible, wait a day to complain about homework, assignments, disciplinary actions, and the like. These may feel like crises in the moment, but if you wait, you may just realize they are not. Besides, as you should be moving your child toward a greater responsibility for discussing issues with her teachers, these 24 hours give you a perfect interval to develop a game plan with your child. Take this time to breathe and calm down. Once you and your child have distance from the emotional side of the incident, take some time to talk about what happened. Ask open-ended questions about what was happening before, during, and after the incident. Let teachers know about big events unfolding at home. Don't wait until the divorce or child custody battle or chronic nightmares or eating disorder has gotten to a crisis point before filling the teacher in on what's happening at home. If you let your child's teacher in on these things early, it will be much easier to accommodate, adapt, and help children cope at school. For many students, school provides a refuge from troubles at home, and the more teachers can create that sense of refuge and safety, the better. Make an appointment to speak with the teacher if you feel a face-to-face is important, or if the situation is too sensitive to put down in writing. However you choose to do it, the goal is to communicate with the teacher so she can help your child. Express interest in what's being taught. Let the teacher know you are interested in what's going on at school and find ways to explore that learning at home. Find opportunities to ask your child to teach you about something she learned in school. Feign ignorance about why lava forms or how pulleys work, and allow your child to enlighten you. Ask for details about what is happening at school and don't accept "I don't remember" as an answer. When parents complained that this was the stock answer they received from my students, I started sending home weekly bullet lists of the big ideas we discuss in class, from the daily etymology or cultural literacy lessons to capsule summaries about the authors and stories we read. Once you know a little bit about what's going on at school, you can open the door to conversations about that material and how it relates to the greater world. Find opportunities to express gratitude. Teachers receive daily complaints, but it's rare to hear feedback about the successes. I'm not suggesting that you invent praise or compliments out of thin air, but when things are going smoothly, or if your child is talking about something she's excited about in school, thank her teacher. Better yet, write a thank you note. I guarantee that note will either get tacked to the wall of the teacher's office or tucked in a special folder she keeps in her desk drawer. I have one of those folders in my desk drawer, and I've carried some of the notes inside it with me since my very first teaching job. The value of a thank you note cannot be overstated, and the practice of expressing gratitude is a great lesson to model for your kids. Have your child deliver that note to the teacher's mailbox or office and make him part of the gesture. If you are not one for expressing your emotions in writing, use someone else's. My favorite gratitude quote, one I use all the time in notes when I'm not sure of what else to say, comes from Dr. Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. My students have rekindled my spark more times than I can count, and I try to remember to thank them for that as often as possible. In order to model that expression of gratitude further, I teach my students to write handwritten, not emailed, thank you notes to someone they appreciate, and we often receive grateful thank you notes for our thank you notes. In an age where email, texts, and tweets dominate our lives, a proper thank you note is a true gift. In order to feel connected, we all need to feel appreciated, and children should learn how to convey appreciation from a young age. Begin with the assumption that you have an interest in common, the student. The vast majority of teachers go into education because they care about children and are excited about the subject they teach. What struck me over and over again during interviews with teachers was the genuine concern and love most teachers feel for their students, so keep this in mind when you're tempted to assume that a teacher has it out for your child. A high school English teacher offers this advice to parents and teachers for successful parent-teacher conferences. Begin with the common ground, the fact that both parent and teacher should truly care about the student in question. Both should be seeking what is truly best for the student. There are exceptions to this assumption, of course, but if you go into the school year with this mindset, your child's teacher will be far more likely to follow your lead.
This is the end of the disc. The audiobook continues on the next disc.